Hello. So, continuing part C, talking about drought. Okay, lots of the world's most arable land turning quickly to desert under drought. The precipitation regime is changing on the planet. For every degree Celsius rise in temperature, there's 7% more water vapor. The jet streams, which guide storms and guide patterns of where water is carried, are completely fracturing and slowing down and changing. So everything is an open question. What is not uncertain is that these changes in the redistribution of water on the planet will have an enormous impact on our ability to grow food. Okay, so breadbasket regions of the planet will shift. So it talks about Syria, it talks about Iraq, and things like that. Okay, we've had periods in the past. For example, we had this massive civilization called the Anasazi civilization living in the U.S. Southwest, and they just vanished. They just moved on. They moved elsewhere. You know, the regime of precipitation probably changed, and they just weren't able to grow any food, and they had to go elsewhere. Okay, right now there's a large number of unnourished people, 800 million globally. This is not so much a lack of food, it's a problem with the food distribution. There's been talk in the spring of unprecedented famine, quadruple famine in Africa and the Middle East, in Somalia, South Sudan, Nigeria, and Yemen, that could kill 20 million people this year alone. You know, we waste about 1/3 of our food. You know, grocery stores don't carry food that doesn't look good, but it's perfectly healthy. We basically are, we're really dropping the ball on responding to climate. But luckily, you know, as the climate deteriorates, more and more people are saying, hey, we've got a problem, we've got to do things differently. But we're not acting as a civilization, as a species that wants to survive. We're still, you know, haphazardly doing little bits here on the edge and little bits here, and we're like an orchestra where everybody is playing out of tune, different instruments, ignoring what everybody else is doing. There's no conductor that is saying this is what you must do. And you know, we get conductors like Donald Trump. Forget it. You know, humanity is finished. You know, throw out science, get rid of the scientists. It's all ideology. You know, support all of the powerful fossil fuel companies, more coal, all this kind of crap. It's just like, it's mind-bogglingly stupid. And you know, so another idea is that as the ice melts, as the permafrost melts, there's all kinds of bacteria that have been frozen in there, and they'll become reanimated, and perhaps diseases will recirculate, and humans have no immunity to them. So this is a possibility. Terrifying bugs. So the 1918 flu, there's definitely remnants found in Alaska. You know, that killed 500 million people, or infected 500 million, killed 20% of them, 1 in 5. Smallpox, bubonic plague, etc., etc. So, you know, so this is a threat. I don't know too much about how serious this threat is. You know, will the organism survive the thaw, etc., etc. There's some examples of some really old bacteria and so on. You know, there's a whole bunch of reindeer that were killed. I'll talk about animal extinctions from various reasons later. And things like that. Of course, with globalization and intermingling of populations, you know, people flying from one country to another, when things you know, the vectors to take these diseases from one place to another are enormous. So the risk is high. Talks about the Zika virus. You know, it was just in Uganda until recently. Then it started spreading. Okay, malaria, things like that. You know, thrive in hotter regions. Mosquitoes carry it. For every degree increase in temperature, the parasite reproduces 10 times faster. Okay, unbreathable air. So these are all different aspects of things. We obviously need air. You know, carbon dioxide, if it goes to 1,000 ppm, human cognitive ability declines by 21% at this level. I think this is a problem indoors. We need to have little cheap sensors to monitor CO2 levels in all different rooms. You go into a meeting, you know, what seems to be a stuffy room, not enough air circulation, people start yawning after, you know, a time, and it's not just because the meeting's gone on. The CO2 levels have probably built up in the room, and it's decreasing cognitive ability, decision-making ability. There was a couple interesting studies. I recommend that you have a look if you just Google it. Small increases in pollution shorten lifespans by 10 years. You know, if you look in, you know, so particles, whether, you know, very small particles can lodge deep into the lungs and the alveoli. It talks about, like, we're talking hundreds of thousands of people die from smoke each year, wildfire smoke. There's more and more forest fires. Fire season's extending. It's hotter, so the fires are burning hotter. Wildfires are twice as destructive today. As by 2050, they'll be twice as bad as they are today, according to this. You know, peatland fires, for example. Think of Indonesia, the amount of CO2 that was released. The global CO2 release was up by 40% just from the burning in a year or two in Indonesia. You know, Amazon is getting second 1 in a 100-year event in the space of 5 years. It's drying out. You know, when a region loses forest, it doesn't necessarily get those forests back. It can get grasslands or savanna or even turn into deserts quickly. 20% of our oxygen from the Amazon, lots also from the ocean, from the phytoplankton, which is also decreasing. The oceans are under severe stress. Okay, China, the air quality index. Just Google air quality index and have a look at where you live and look at places around the world. The risks top, you know, the risks top out at 300 to 500 roughly. And China is often over 800. You know, people are dying. They're not living to be as long. They're not enjoying a full life. Their health is severely harmed, and they probably don't even know it. You know, although if they have a smartphone, they can check. And you know, there's huge risks. Okay, climatologists are careful talking about Syria. You know, okay, I mean, climate change, you know, caused an enormous drought in Syria, probably worst they've ever had. You know, 2006 to 2010, 1.5 million farmers could no longer farm anymore. They moved to the cities, basically had no jobs, a lot of unrest, civil war broke out. So climate change is a threat multiplier. That's a term the military uses, and here we talk about the military. You know, it's not just bases being submerged. It's the you know, the unrest is greatly on the rise. And look, you know, the biggest the resources that have gone to fighting terrorism, you know, they're not addressing the biggest risk to humanity. The biggest risk is climate change, and if we ignore that, we're going down. There's no question. You know, there's huge displacement of people. Heat increases crime rates, swearing on social media, the likelihood of, you know, violent behavior, even in baseball, for example. Permanent economic collapse, okay? Economies can only take so much. You know, infrastructure is being crushed by extreme weather events. Costs are going way, way up. Insurance companies are suffering. if your country is not, it basically is a poverty generator. It's an equalizer. It brings everybody down to a level of poverty. It'll take down Western civilization. This is an ongoing process. We're seeing country after country fail. Let's look at the root cause of what's happening. The effective GDP, a degree Celsius costs 1.2% of GDP, and so on. Okay, there's economic devastation. The oceans, of course, as the oceans warm, warm water floats on top of cold water, reduces vertical mixing. You don't get oxygen down, you don't get nutrients up. The seas stagnate. You get hydrogen sulfide being produced on the seafloor. That comes up and it can affect people. It basically kills everything, in large concentrations. So the oceans are a huge sink for CO2, but they're becoming acidified, and we're losing. Coral reefs are basically dead on vast parts of Australia, and the oceans are very sick. So this is basically, the great filter. It talks about how, we continue going on this path and humans will have mass extinction. Not necessarily every human, but there'll be, we're in the 6th grade extinction. It's not just plants and animals, it's humans as well. Okay, so there's different climatologists that were interviewed for this. And some of the interviews here are, this is Wally Broker. He coined the term global warming on the worst case scenario. This is paleontologist Peter Ward. He wrote a book, Under a Green Sky. He talks about hydrogen sulfide coming up from so-called Canfield oceans. Another very good interview. Then Michael Mann is saying, these are low probability but catastrophic scenarios. So, I disagree. They're not low probability. These are certainty. These are going to happen if we continue on the present rate. Okay, there's no other conclusion that can be reached by a logical analysis or a logical look at what's happening. So I have to disagree with that. When did the end begin? You can talk about humans developing fire. You can talk about, we did farming. We got rid of a lot of natural plant life. Was that the beginning? Was it the West, the Columbus, the Europeans discovering the New World, marking, starting globalization? Was it modern capitalism, which is, profit, 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 greed, 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 pillage the earth? Was it mass production, producing mass trash, and so on. There's lots of different ideas there. So, there's articles on both sides saying, this is an apocalyptic article or it's no exaggeration. I think it's not an exaggeration. Human civilization is at stake. There's no question. Just wait a few years until we lose Arctic sea ice for the first time, and I think that will, there'll be panic globally, and we've got to bloody well do something. This paper just came out in Nature, this opinion article in Nature. 3 years to safeguard our climate. These guys don't want to, they don't want to say we're in a climate emergency. We only have 3 years to safeguard our climate. Our backs are against the wall. They don't use the term emergency, but they're basically saying the same thing. The power and peril of climate disaster porn. For long times people have argued you can't tell people, you can't give people this bad news about the climate. They can't handle it. They'll freeze. I think that is, critics say doom and gloom is unpersuasive and discouraging. I think this is utter bullshit. Okay? We have to tell the truth about what is happening to our climate system in order for people to declare a climate change emergency, in order for us to take the strong actions that are needed to turn this ship around. Okay? We can't sugarcoat it. We can't be optimistic and say, oh, everything's going to work out fine. Okay? Did this freak you out, this article? Yes, good. Okay? I'm of that view. Why scare tactics won't stop climate change? Forget it. We need them.